This is the Titan Army P32A2S2, a 32 inches 240Hz 1440p IPS monitor, and is one of the best monitors you can get for the price, $340. And this since the other options that you have currently in the market are either 1080p instead of 1440p or are 1440p VA panels, with the 1440p IPS ones usually being around $100 more expensive, or I should say instead over $100 more expensive. And you might still think $340 is quite a stretch, but again, this is an IPS panel, not a VA one, meaning that it'll compromise a bit in terms of contrast, but it'll have way better color accuracy and you won't have that annoying trademark of the VA panels, black smearing. Even the top tier VA panels will have the same black smearing when going below a certain amount of hertz, and the reason manufacturers usually use them is because, well, they're quite cheaper and usually easier to clock at higher refresh rates. But as for this monitor, I've been having a great time playing some games, watching some series and overall testing it, using it mostly with my minis for a mini PC. And by the way, I just want to let you know that you can rest assured because Titan Army is not a new brand per se, it has been around 2014 and they definitely have their space in the market. But well, let's get our hands dirty and see what we get in the box. But first I want to thank Titan Army for sending the monitor, and I also want to thank today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. In the box we have the monitor's feet, the monitor's arm, the most common power adapter, and a bag with several things, like user's manual, the product warranty card, a nice DisplayPort cable, and of course the usual power cord. We also have these screws on the left that are meant for the monitor support, and the ones in the right that are meant for VESA mounting. The monitor kind of didn't bring an HDMI cable, I believe, because the HDMI version here wouldn't be able to run at 240Hz. That's why. So you definitely need a DisplayPort cable in order to run this monitor at 1440p 240Hz. Just for you to know. In terms of assembling, the V-shaped base is a bit old school here, and instead of the usual easy screw mechanism, we have 3 screws we need to set properly in the bottom base, but I mean, you'll have to do this process just once, so it is not a big deal to me. Then you slide in the monitor's arm into the display, and that's it. And don't worry because it will lock the monitor properly, so you don't need to worry about dropping it, as the stand is pretty firm. In terms of design, the monitor doesn't bring anything new actually, using the standard black for most of the monitor and red just for a little line in the bottom of the support and the top of it as well. And then we have some big punchy letters saying Titan Army in the front, which I honestly don't really like that much and I would definitely prefer to have the logo instead, but I guess this is easier for the new users to remember. In case you like RGB, we also have the LED stripe in the back that will cycle through several colors, I believe, even though mine is red most of the time, or of course can be turned off if it is just not your thing. Overall, in terms of design, the monitor feels quite standard for sure, but I believe you can't really ask for much more with this price tag. As for ergonomics, the monitor can be tilted from -5 to 15 degrees and swiveled by 15 degrees to each side. We cannot pivot the monitor though, which is kind of a bummer. The total height adjustment is 9.5 centimeters or 3.7 inches, and the mounted monitor weighs around 9 kilograms. As for the connections, the Titan Army P32A2S2 is really the simplest you can get. And honestly, you can't really ask much more for a thing that packs an IPS 1440p 240Hz display at $340. We have the power connection, 2 HDMI ports, 2 display ports, and one 3.5mm audio jack, meaning we don't have any kind of reverse charging or KVM switching, and I would love to have at least reverse charging with a monitor this big. And I know they can't do magic, but I believe that Titan Army could at least add some speakers to the monitor because we don't really have one, so they could add some speakers at the price point of $340, just for the more standard user, I guess. As for image quality, it is good. We have a 240Hz 1440p IPS display, like I said several times, and a good quality one, so even though the contrast is not what most people would expect, especially if you're playing in a dark room all the time, the other points just deliver, with an outstanding picture quality and great color accuracy. But in case you don't trust me and want to see some numbers, these are the numbers that I got from my Calibrite color checker, and as you can see they are pretty close to what they should be. And going into the quality again, I have two OLED panels, one nano IPS one, and even a decent VA panel. And I can tell you that the quality of this Titan Army monitor is good. Colors are punchy but not overly saturated, which is great, and you have 1 milliseconds gray-to-gray response time that will show itself pretty handy when playing competitive shooters, for example, delivering that flawless experience in terms of ghosting and overshooting. And by the way, when you see a monitor saying that it has 1 millisecond gray-to-gray response time, that's exactly that. It doesn't mean that the monitor has 1 millisecond of latency, it has 1 millisecond of the pixels going gray to gray. And yeah, the monitor latency will be much higher on the internal monitor parts and so on. So we're talking about only gray to gray and only the panel, not the monitor itself. And one thing that I was honestly worried about was the pixel density. If you have a 32 inches monitor with the same resolution as a 27 inches one, it means the 32 inches one has a lower pixel density, since it has the same amount of pixels to cover a wider space. And the lower the pixel density is, the more you are prone to see the pixels when looking at the monitor, creating an unpleasant experience. For example, 1080p for 24 inches display is more than fine, but as soon as you put 1080p on a 27 inches one, it just looks horrible. And I knew 27 inches was okay for 1440p because I have these monitors, so I thought 32 inches would look kind of horrible for 1440p. But I actually got a nice surprise. As long as you're not really close to the monitor, which won't really happen because the monitor is quite big, you won't have any issues with the pixels. And on the bright side, you'll be able to enjoy a 1440p 240Hz IPS panel for a lower value than usual. And in my point of view, that's a good trade-off. And the panel also supports HDR, although it is HDR 400, but if you really want to use it, it is there and it is available. It also supports the usual adaptive sync technology that almost every monitor supports nowadays, and it works very well on both AMD and Nvidia GPUs, delivering those 240Hz smoothly without a problem. This, of course, if you're using DisplayPort, because with HDMI you'll reach like 100Hz tops. My experience, well, it has been a blast. Playing titles like League of Legends and Valorant on this system, having those 240Hz passing through your eyes with little input latency while enjoying the 32 inches screen space is just amazing, and it feels so smooth. And again, I have 138, 160, 165 and 240Hz monitors, and even though 160 is more than fine to me, which is actually my daily driver, for fast shooters, the 240Hz do make the difference. And people telling you it doesn't are, well, less sensitive to motion, or they're just running super high-end monitors, because this is great. The controlling buttons are of good quality, but they're still old school, with each button having kind of a specific option or a specific control instead of going for just one button. And the OSD, well, it is not that the OSD is bad, it is just odd. I know they want to follow the design and color schemes of the brand, but in my opinion a higher definition and better structured OSD would look much better and make their brand look more professional. And don't get me wrong, because the OSD has everything you need there and is actually quite fast and responsive, so I guess a little design change would make it great. And the same goes for the buttons. They're old school, but they work pretty well. But since I was talking on the bad points, I also have to talk about the good points, because they have a refresh rate monitor that you can select in the OSD options, and while you're playing Counter-Strike 2, for example, you can measure the amount of hertz that you're having, because even though you can see the FPS, sometimes the adaptive sync just doesn't work well, or you don't really have the adaptive sync enabled or something like that, and using that monitor you can see the spikes, you kind of have a graph for the refresh rate as well, and it is actually interesting to see. That's a very good addition on the OSD side. So I also said some bad parts, so I needed to say this because this is cool. And with this all said, the Titan Army P32A2S2, which could have a nicer name I guess, doesn't really bring anything new, with its appealing points being the good build quality and the 32 inches 240Hz IPS display, that even though is IPS delivers nice deep blacks that are better than most of the IPS panels that I've seen so far. I believe that at this price point, this monitor is well worth buying, and most people will definitely enjoy it. And of course there are some things that I would change, like the RGB in the back, that I would just get rid of, because unless Titan Army is going for Ambilight, the RGB is quite useless to me, and of course I would focus a bit more on revamping the software and maybe add some speakers. But for $340, sign me in. And well guys, I guess that's all for today's video. Thank you very much. I want to thank Titan Army as well for sending the monitor, and I want to apologize for taking so much time to review it, but again, there were so many things in my life, and that's the moment I could do it actually. But I believe this is it. I would like to have more hardware to test more the latencies, the response times and so on, but sadly I still don't have that hardware. I will most likely buy it soon to once again to test the latencies and so on, but for now this is it. So far, very impressed with the monitor, and unless you are sitting really close to it, 1440p is okay-ish for 32 inches, and definitely for 340 bucks, this is definitely worth it. 240 Hz, IPS, 1440p as well, 1440p, just a great buy, definitely, a great buy. Can you buy better at lower prices? Possibly. Did I find any monitor that offers you the same for this price? I didn't. Not in Newegg, not in several other places. So for me, definitely a good deal. Thank you very much for watching guys, and see you in the next video. Cheers.